Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland and I'm in front of the equestrian statue of Charles I on Trafalgar Square in London. Looking behind, you may recognise a bit more of Trafalgar Square with Nelson's column. So I'm never going to get a quieter day to film here, and I don't have my microphone thing. So Charles I, he was born in Dunfermline Abbey in Scotland in November 1600. His father was James VI, King of Scots. His mother was Anne of Denmark, who was Queen of Scots by virtue of her marriage. As I say, she was from Denmark. So he had an elder brother Henry. He had a number of sisters as well. When he was 2.5, Elizabeth I of England died, childless, unwed. So his father became King of England whilst remaining King of Scots. And then they moved down to England. He didn't move immediately. He couldn't walk or talk until he was 3, which was exceptionally late, so he was developmentally challenged. He was a rather short man, even for the time. The average height of a man then might have been about 5'4", and he was closer to just 5'. So his elder brother Henry was Prince of Wales and going to take over, but Henry died when he was about 18. So then it fell to Charles to become king. From the things he said, he seems to be reasonably intelligent, but it was incredibly vain. I suppose it was difficult not for a king to feel that way, and his father pushed the notion of divine right of kings into his head. Anyway, there was the idea of the Spanish match of marrying the Infanta, as in the King of Spain's daughter. Now, the Reformation had taken place a couple of generations earlier in both Scotland and England, obviously in England first. So he was brought up in the Church of Scotland, later the Church of England. His father sort of had a sort of high church tendencies. Says, yes, we'll have the Reformation, I want to be head of the church, but believing in Arminianism. Charles I also worshipped the king, as I said, at the conference in 1604. In a sense, he was right, but the other way around, if you see what I mean, because when they got rid of the king, they later got rid of the bishops under Charles I's reign. So the Church of Scotland had been Presbyterian, as in ruled by elders, as in presbyteros in Greek, whereas the Church of England was Episcopalian, as in it had episcopes, as in bishops. Then James I brought back bishops into the Church of Scotland, or a hardline Protestant who say, no, that's too much like Catholicism. Anyway, Charles I went to Spain with the Duke of Buckingham, one of his father's favourites, to see about marrying the Infanta. And they wore false beard, they behaved themselves so badly, the Spanish demanded that the Duke of Buckingham be executed once he got back to England. But that didn't happen, and the negotiations turned so sour, there was a war against Spain, which his father had striven to avoid. But James I was very ill by 1625, somewhat losing his mind. That year he died, and he had to conduct a war, the catastrophic war against Spain. It was a Spanish victory, the attack on Cadiz, led by the Duke of Buckingham, which was a disaster, mainly because the English were so indisciplined. When the English soldiers landed on a beach and they made a march on Cadiz to destroy the Spanish fleet at anchor, but they found a warehouse full of wine, broke into it and got stocious and lazed around on the beach. The Spanish found they were there and came to kill them, but the Duke of Buckingham hightailed it out of there. He was later stabbed to death by John Felton, who blamed him for the failure of this attack on Cadiz. Felton was sentenced to be executed, and it decided it would take place in London, not Portsmouth, the headquarters of the Royal Navy. They thought the crowd would be so sympathetic to him in London, but they were, and he was buried back in Portsmouth. Anyway, so there was the personal rule of Charles I for 12 years, when he ruled without Parliament, and he appointed Archbishop of Canterbury, and he wrote this Book of Common Prayer, which decided to impose on Scotland. Because remember, when James I had become King of England, the deal was that Scotland didn't have to copy England or vice versa. But this was to be imposed on Scotland without anyone's agreement. And the Church of Scotland called the General Assembly even without the King's consent and said they will not accept this. So then they signed a covenant, a national covenant, and there was a big rebellion in Scotland, the Covenanters, and he'd failed to defeat them. Charles I had. They had come in and seized northern England, seized Newcastle. People couldn't bring coal by ship to London in winter. So that was the centre of the coal production. Don't bring coal to Newcastle, as they say. There's no point because there's so much coal there already. Anyway, the Covenanters were saying, we won't leave England until you give us £850 for every day we've occupied the northeast of England. And Charles I had gambled very heavily on defeating the Covenanters and lost, was eventually obliged to resummon Parliament. He'd been taxing a lot, imposing lots of unpopular policies, promoting unpopular people like the Earl of Strafford, and eventually was obliged to resummon the Parliament of England and Wales to get them to vote taxes for him, but they're irate. They made their grand remonstrance, their list of demands at Strafford. They passed an act of attainder against him, and he was put to death. So Lord Strafford, who was a very loyal servant of the king, who believed in the thorough, more or less ruling by royal fiat, said, you know, you need to do this for the security of your throne, so please, I urge you to sign my death warrant, and I bear no ill will. Consider yourself absolved. So with a heavy heart against his better judgment, he did so, and that's why Lord Strafford suffered the Dolorous stroke at Tower Hill, as in he was beheaded. Some years later, when Charles I came to put his head on the block just down the street, he felt this had been the beginning of the end, and in a way it was poetic justice that he should be suffering the same fate as he'd imposed on Lord Strafford. You see down there, slightly to the right, probably can't make out from this angle which one it is, there is the banqueting house, and it's just outside down there, 500 meters away, where Charles I was executed. Anyway, I shan't tell you the whole story of his life, but the English Civil War broke out in August 1642 when it attempted to arrest 5 politicians in Parliament. It's not the 5 members, it's actually 1 in the House of Lords, 4 in the House of Commons. They're not all MPs, and it doesn't include Oliver Cromwell, the MP for Huntingdon, who was a complete unknown back then. So he lost the English Civil War. He surrendered to the Scots Covenanters, who handed him over to the English parliamentarians. He escaped again, restarted the Civil War again very briefly. Then he stood trial for his life at Westminster Hall for having, and was eventually put to death down the street. I won't tell you the whole tale, but I've seen that there's videos of the Society of King Charles the Martyr, the 30th of January each year. In the 1920s and 30s, they used to gather here and process down there towards where he breathed his last. But there was little traffic then, so it was easy to do. But these days would be unviable. Bearing in mind this is Easter Sunday during coronavirus, this is the least traffic you're ever going to see. Even then the procession down there just wouldn't work. But there's a gathering outside the banqueting house, prayer, and then inside for a full church service for an hour. Then there might be a luncheon afterwards. The Society of King Charles the Martyr, those who wish to blazon forth the splendorous name of Charles, of that name, the first. So yeah, it was the 30th of January 1649 when he lost his head. So he was accorded the singular privilege of having his head sewn back onto his carcass before being interred. I can't remember where he was buried. I have a feeling it's in Windsor Castle. Anyway, all distances from Londinium are measured from this statue here, because we're right beside Trafalgar Square. So there used to be on this spot in the Middle Ages the Charing Cross, Chère Reine, dear Queen, for Philippa of Hainault, but it was destroyed in the Reformation, and then this was put up sometime after the Restoration. 1660, Charles I, his son comes back, Charles II becomes king. Only then could you put this up. So you can see the angels and the royal coat of arms, somewhat weathered and worn by the wind and the rain, and I suppose acid rain, especially in the days when we had lead in petrol. Alright, that's enough from me, George from Ireland. Please follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, and book online lessons from me in history, politics, religious studies, geography, French law, and so forth. And choose me to help you with essays, dissertations, theses, and pick me as your tour guide in a London week. Toodaloo.